We now move on to private members' business, and our first order is the Honourable Kyle McGinn.
I move that this House expresses concern at the increasing casualisation of Western Australia's workforce and the adverse effects on Western Australians' people's security and certainty of employment.
Honourable Kyle McGinn. No, you move it. Honourable Kyle McGinn.
Thank you. Thank you, Acting President. Honourable members, it's with great concern that I bring this motion in the House for debate today. To open, I want to recognise all Western Australian workers across all industries that find casualisation a reality on their day-to-day working lives. I know from personal experience the challenges and frustrations that insecure work brings to workers and their families. What is casualisation? This is an incredibly hard question to answer. The figures available admit to the difficulties of identifying what the definition of a casual is. Some say it means a worker on work arrangements that reflect informality, uncertainty and irregularity. Put in some context, a person employed on a casual basis with no commitments to hours per week, an hourly rate with penalty rates and a 20% loading on that rate to cover the financial benefits that a permanent employee receives, such as annual leave and sick leave. In my opinion, in a lot of cases, a casual is just an excuse for bad employers to exploit and take advantage of employees, basically dangling a carrot and controlling working lives with a string. As an example, I will use my personal experience on my first ship in the offshore sector and the carrot that I was fooled with by the employer. When I started my employment, I was advised by the employer that as a casual, I get 20% loading on my wages, which at first I thought was unbelievable. And if I wanted to make it in this industry, they suggested to me that permanency was a critical part of survival. In order for me to be considered for a permanent job, I should request that the company holds on to my 20% loading earnings in their account for 12 months. So each pay I would get my wage, but my loading would stay with the company. At the end of the 12-month period, in which I would assume the company earned interest off my funds that would make me permanent, they would then make me permanent and pay out my 20% loading. When I got to the end of my 12 months, gee, did I get a surprise. I get told that the vessel I'm working on is finishing up and heading overseas. Now, I knew at the time that the company still had a heap of other vessels that were undermanned, new swings coming in from overseas, so there was an abundance of work for this company. So instead of being moved to another vessel, which is common practice, I was told that there is no vessel for me to go to and I would not receive a permanent job. Here is your 20% loading paid out in bulk, so the taxman went bang and took a big grab as well. So I had done what I thought was the right thing by the company to get a permanent job. It turned out to be a carrot that left my 20% loading in the employer's account until the end of that 12 months, and I was unemployed. I do not believe that this scenario or similar scenarios are rare. I just don't think we are hearing about it. We are not being told because there is fear of ramifications and not getting further work. I also believe people see it as head down, bum up until you get a permanent job. And what happens in that period, they just bear the brunt of it. Imagine for a moment that you are under the control of another person. This person has the ability to dictate your family's income, the amount of food you can put on the table. These employers decide on many occasions, without ramifications, whether or not you receive that 5 p.m. text message advising you are working tomorrow. 5 p.m. and sometimes even later, every day you have to sit by the phone waiting for that phone call or text message to tell you that you have been rostered for the next day or you haven't been rostered for the next day. The stress that comes with that, waiting by the phone, you can only imagine every day, not knowing. This, of course, means you cannot commit to any other work because you've also got to be obligated to one employer if you want to continue to get shifts. This, of course, also means that you can't plan anything with the family or friends or any other part of your life until you receive that message at 5 p.m. And sometimes, I have to say, it does get as late as 8 p.m, I have heard from casual employees. During my time as an organiser with the Maritime Union of Australia, I was involved in numerous enterprise agreement negotiations within the North West region. It may or may not shock members, but the majority of these negotiations wasn't about pay rises. That wasn't the employee's number one claim. The number one claim was permanency. Now, I have to admit, for some context, I was organising in the North West, which had just had a massive boom. This was 3 years ago. So I genuinely was shocked, but definitely pleased when my members would say, we want permanent jobs. The shock was that they weren't permanent already, because the work had been there. And not just been there, it had been there abundantly, very clearly. Now, the workers' number one claim was permanency. And the most hard fought by the employer, the most hard fought claim for them not to accept on these occasions was permanency. I certainly do not stand here in this place saying there is no need for casuals. I take on board employers have situations where they may have some short periods of increased work, such as shutdown operations in the mining sector, for example. But I do not agree with the notion that employers rely on casual employment for ongoing work. These are secured contracts. These are a guarantee of work. I have had big meetings with employers literally arguing that even though the work they have is secure for 2 years or even 5 years, they just couldn't make employees permanent. One key company I recall with this situation had less than 20% permanency and the rest were casual. These weren't casuals that had just walked in onto the job 1 or 2 swings here. Most of them had been casuals busting their guts for this company for over 2 years already. This company had gained a reputation through the hard work performed by the employees every day on the job in the port. But despite this, they were basically told, you're good enough to be casual, but you're not good enough to be permanent. That is the message the employers are sending by putting casuals out there day in, day out when there is secure contracts. The work was clearly available, but still the company resisted. Their fallback position was a fixed-term contract. Now, employees were told fixed-term contracts is permanency, minus redundancy and severance. However, after further meetings and discussions with members and through negotiation, it was clear this was not permanency. It was simply another way of saying casual. The reason I say it's another way of saying casual is because within this clause it stated, and this was their idea of a fixed-term contract, the employer decides the length of the term and if to renew or not. Number 2, during any stage of the term, the employer could terminate the employment for whatever reason. How is that secure work? That we can be offered a fixed-term contract. Now, I would agree with the argument that if you were offered a 6-month fixed-term contract, that if the employer decided to pull out, they had to pay you out that 6 months, because that is a guarantee of 6 months' work. Since the EA, the employer has picked up now the majority share of the work in this port. And even after a massive increase in secured contracts that are written on the dotted line, they have not made one employee permanent, instead brought in a flood of new employees who they then handed these fixed-term contracts on the basis of what I've just explained. In a previous debate this week, members in this place made comments around millennials and the struggles they have inherited. I've always been aware and interested and willing to learn more of the struggles many Australians have faced historically, and often ask myself, do we have it harder today in the workforce than our forefathers did? I don't have the answer to that, but I do believe we have lost ground on workers' strength in the workplace due to the modern-day employers' new greed for flexible, expendable, casual labour hire employees. And with this comes a tax on workers' rights across the board, taking advantage of unorganised labour. Workers also have to deal with dramatic job losses, which we have been hit with due to the downturn of work. Instead of competing for work in a pool of 100, there are realities of competing with 1,000 other workers now. This can often lead to workers feeling the need to impress and, more to the point, not upset their employer, worried that they won't get the call to return to work again. I dare anyone to deny that this is not happening. I have seen it. I have been with a worker, his wife and kids, who was cut off from available shifts only sole reason was because he raised a safety issue, which could have been harmful to him and his workmates. Let us not forget to mention the intimidation from employers, in particularly labour hire firms. Joining a union often brings with it the similar punishment. I believe we have an obligation to improve people's lives and recognise that permanent employment provides people and families the security and ability to be approved for home loans, and of course the ability to plan for leave. Spend time with your family and friends, and seemingly undervalued ability to live. Workers should not feel they are just a number, a slave to the economy, a big business, because all workers' lives matter. All workers, casual or permanent. Hand in hand with casual work, regardless of the definition of the day, comes safety risks. I refer to my time in the Pilbara. Work was abundant. You couldn't find enough workers. However, there was still a lot of labour hire and casuals and employment being utilised. I would see and hear of workers who would work 14 days in a fortnight and who would continue working until the work slowed down. This created massive fatigue issues. That was blatantly ignored by employers at the time because they required the workers. Even with my strong stance on workplace safety, I must reflect, because as bad as it sounds, can you blame that employee for doing them hours? They weren't permanent employees. They were the flexible, disrespected casuals that were fighting over every dollar they could earn, and if by some slim chance they could get a permanent job. We must do better, not just to increase Western Australian jobs, but ensure we are securing permanent jobs, giving people security and ensuring they can set up shop permanently in town rather than having to chase the work across this state. I want to refer to a memo from Workplace Express that was on the 5th of July 2017. There's some comments in here, and the heading is the Fair Work Commission to insert casual conversion clauses in the modern awards. I'll read a few statements from it. A 5-member Fair Work Commission full bench has ruled today that modern awards should enable casual employees to elect to convert to full-time or part-time employment subject to certain rules and restrictions. We have decided that it is necessary that modern awards contain a provision by which casual employees may elect to convert full-time or part-time employment, subject to specified criteria and restrictions in order they meet the modern awards objectives. We accept the proposition advanced by the ACTU that the unrestricted use of casual employment without the safeguard of casual conversion clauses may operate to undermine the fairness and relevance of the safety net. However, the decision stopped short of the ACTU's claim. The ACTU wanted casual employees to have the right to elect to convert, having, in a limited number of awards, been deemed to be in full-time or part-time after a certain length of time, unless they elected to remain employed as casuals. I believe in that 100%. If the work is there and you are performing the hours, you should have the opportunity to make the decision for yourself and for your family, whether it be a casual position or a permanent position. And I want to also make it very clear, I'm not standing here and saying that there is no need for casual employment. What I have seen across many industries with my organising background is the blatant disrespect from employers and appreciation of the hard yards employees put in search of a permanent role. There are downturns in industry. There is reduction in work. That's why there's redundancy provisions within permanent employment. That's why the companies have the option to reduce numbers. It's not about saying we need casual employees so they're more flexible and we can just go through them in a transient way of replacing them. And it is tough out there for casuals now with the amount of unemployment, particularly in the heavy industries within the northwest region, shut down work and etc. I just feel as though we here in this place need to recognise and show our concerns, and I will continue over this term and many more terms hopefully, to fight for casuals and their right to be permanent in their workplaces. Thank you.